It was 2 weeks to Christmas. In the city, Mr. John's house was alive with laughter. Children darted through hallways with paper crowns and cardboard swords, shouting about cousins, firewood, and the taste of roasted corn back in the village. Pots simmered, clothes dried on a line by the balcony, and the scent of freshly baked buns drifted through the sitting room. Mr. John's wife, knelt by the bed folding shirts into neat stacks. Her lips moved in quiet prayer. Lord, keep us safe, watch our going out and our coming in. She paused as footsteps approached. Mr. John leaned on the doorframe, grinning. John, let us pray for the journey, Yu said softly, the way one speaks to a dream too fragile to touch. Just 2 minutes. Mr. John waved a hand like he was shooing a fly. Yu, stop. God knows I'm traveling. He doesn't need me to announce it like a town crier. He laughed, a sound big and careless, and kissed her forehead. Warm the car later. We leave at dawn. Yu's eyes clouded. Please. But he was already gone. Whistling down the hallway, the children looked at their mother, then at one another, and shrugged. Mama, must we pray every day? One asked, stretching the question into a groan. Yes, Yu whispered, especially on days when others refuse. Far away in the village, golden dust flickered in a small shaft of light inside the palace hall. The king's crown, heavy with history, sat on a carved pedestal. A tour of the palace had just ended. The king's guards closed the doors and swept footprints from the tiled floor. Outside, a group of youth service members, fresh from a year of teaching and organizing health drives, laughed as they left the grounds. Among them was Nonso. His eyes had lingered on the crown long after everyone else walked past. Did you see it? He whispered, voice barely contained. Real gold. Kemi, a fellow corper with a quiet, firm gaze, shook her head. Leave the crown where it belongs. The elders say it is tied to the spirits of the land. Those who steal from it never live to tell the tale. Spirits are stories, Nonso scoffed. Stories to keep poor people poor. He lifted his hands as if weighing coins. Do you know what it would fetch in the city? Do you know what it would cost your soul? Kemi asked. He smiled in a way that did not quite reach his eyes. Watch me. Back in the city, dusk folded over buildings like a curtain. Mr. John drove home from the office. Mind on tires and traffic. On snacks and spare batteries. Rounding a corner, he saw her, an elderly woman by the roadside, pressing a hand to her lower back as she flagged down cars that sped by in a hurry to get nowhere. Mr. John slowed. Mama, where are you going? He asked, rolling down his window. The next street, my son, she said, voice as thin as paper. Would you take me? Get in, he said, and helped her into the front seat. For a while they drove in silence, the hum of the engine a lullaby. Then the old woman cleared her throat. My son, do not be angry at my words. Mr. John smiled. What is it, Mama? She folded her hands in her lap. This Christmas, do not travel to your village. But if you must, pray and fast before you go. There is danger ahead. Mr. John's laughter filled the car. Too loud for the small space. Mama, this is not the first time I've traveled home for Christmas. Nothing will happen. I have said what I came to say. The woman replied. The rest is no longer in my hands. At the next street she descended, thanked him, and disappeared into the dusk like smoke fading into the air. Mr. John shook his head. Amused. People and their stories, he muttered, and drove on. In the village, moonlight silvered the roof of the palace. Deep in its shadow, 3 shapes approached the low wall at the back gate. Nonso hoisted himself atop the wall and reached down to help the other 2. The courtyard was a quiet bowl of darkness. The door to the inner hall yielded to the tiniest pressure. Inside, the crown waited, gleaming like a captured sunrise. For a moment, no one breathed. It's even more beautiful up close, one of the boys whispered, awe mixing with greed. Hurry, Nonso hissed, his hands shaking as he wrapped the crown in a dark cloth and slid it into his bag. Let's go before the guards. A distant cymbal clanged, a footstep. They froze. Then the sound faded, replaced by the long, patient breath of the night. They slipped back into the courtyard, over the wall, into the alley, and were gone. At dawn, 2 journeys set out. Mr. John's family, denied the use of their car, the engine stubbornly dead, stood at a crowded motor park among traders, travelers, and the tang of diesel. Yu pressed her palms together under her shawl. "Let us pray," she said, and a handful of strangers bowed their heads with her, while others rolled their eyes. Across the same dawn, the Corpers boarded a chartered bus. Kemi gathered a few friends near the door and whispered, "Father, cover our journey." Nonso laughed from the back. "Mommy Kemi, pray for our pockets too." The roads bled into long ribbons of dust. Sunlight climbed a determined ladder up the sky. Inside the buses, conversations rose and fell like tides. Families shared stories. Strangers exchanged snacks. Sleep came and went. Then the first sign. Mr. John's bus coughed and shuddered to a stop. The driver swore softly, climbed down, and peered into the belly of the engine. The heat pressed on everyone like a hand. Children grew restless. Mothers fanned cheeks and foreheads with folded newspapers. After an hour, the engine roared back to life and they rolled onward. On the Corpers' bus, a sharp pop split the air. The front tire exploded. Rubber flayed like a torn drum. The driver steadied the wheel. "Jaw tight. Calm down," he shouted. "We will change it." They pulled to the shoulder. Dust rose like a prayer that did not know where to go. When both buses returned to the road, a strange weight fell over the world, like a curtain you could not see but felt on your skin. The trees leaned in, even the wind seemed to hush. Mr. John's driver slammed the brake. The brakes are not catching. Panic cracked the air. The bus fishtail-ed. A tanker loomed ahead like a mountain moving in the wrong direction. "Jesus!" someone screamed. Yu wrapped her arms around the children. "Lord, save us." Metal met metal with a sound that split the morning open. Glass sprayed. Luggage broke free like birds escaping a cage. Then, a ringing silence, thick, absolute. On the other road, the Corpers' driver pressed the pedal and felt nothing. The bus skated down a slope like a stone on a river. "Hold on," he cried. Screams scattered. The world tilted. The bus dropped into a ditch with a thunder that felt personal. When the dust settled, 3 bodies did not rise again. Kemi crawled out bleeding from the elbow. Searching faces. "Nonso?" she shouted. No answer. She turned and saw footprints in the soft dirt. Small and fast, fleeing away from the wreck. A black bag hugged to a running chest. Back at Mr. John's accident site, rescuers swarmed. People with uniforms, people without. Hands formed chains. Children were lifted, crying but whole. Yu stood, stunned, then checked herself and her children. No gash, no bruise, only shaking. Mr. John lay near the front, eyes open, breath ragged. Below the knees, there was nothing but wreckage where legs should have been. At the hospital, the smell of antiseptic diluted the world. Yu knelt at her husband's bedside. "Lord, you spared us. Spare him too," she whispered, tears making small rivers down her cheeks. The door opened. The old woman from the roadside stepped in as if she had been expected all along. She sat by Mr. John's bed and folded her hands. "Do you remember me?" "Yes, Mama," Mr. John said, voice hoarse with regret. "I told you not to go," she said, not unkindly. "I told you to pray and to fast." Her eyes softened when they found Yu. "It is your wife's prayers that built a shield around your household. Without them, there would be nothing left to cry over." In another house in another city, Nonso slipped through his front door with the bag pressed to his chest. His youngest brother, Toba, ran to him, bubbling with questions. "Brother, did you bring me something?" Later, Nonso said too quickly, his voice a tight wire. "Go and play." He hid the crown beneath his bed. But some things cannot be hidden from the world that made them. That evening, Toba slipped in the bathroom, struck his head on a wooden shelf, and the music of his little laughter went silent. The house filled with wails that had nowhere else to go. Nonso sat in a corner, rigid, eyes dry because guilt had swallowed even his tears. Before dawn, his father's body stiffened, a sudden storm inside a strong tree. They carried him to the bed, whispered prayers that tripped over one another. "Call the prophet," his mother said, voice tearing. The prophet came with a satchel of quiet things, leaves and oils. Words and silences. He looked at the father, then at the family, and spoke as if speaking to the room itself. "Someone has taken what does not belong to them. Until it is returned, there will be no peace in this house." Nonso stared at his hands. I didn't take anything," he lied, the lie tasting of metal and fear. The prophet's eyes lingered, then moved on. "Return it," he said to the air, as if the walls were listening. "Or this is only the beginning." Night came wearing a different face. Whispers crawled along the ceiling, slipped under doors, collected in corners. A draft moved through the corridor although windows were closed. At the threshold of sleep, a voice threaded through the room. "Brother," it called. Nonso turned, heartbeat in his throat. In the doorway stood Toba, eyes hollow as empty bowls. "Return the crown," the little voice said, gentle as it had always been. And then the shape and the sound dissolved like salt in water. Morning broke sharp and merciless. At the market, Nonso staggered, clutching his bag. He tried to bargain for a buyer. A fence, a man who knew men, but the air pressed back. From nowhere and everywhere at once. Masquerades, tall shadows in layered cloth, faces hidden behind ancestral wood, burst upon him. Whips cracked the air. Nonso cried out, falling to his knees. To the crowd he looked like a madman fighting invisible air. "What is wrong with him?" someone whispered. "A curse," someone else answered, "because sometimes you do not need evidence to feel truth." "I stole the king's crown," Nonso shouted between sobs, lashes, and the stunned silence of the market. "I stole it." He stumbled from the square to the prophet's door, pushed it open, and collapsed on the mat. "Help me, they won't stop," he sobbed. "I took the crown. It is here." The prophet watched him with eyes like deep water. "That crown is tied to the spirits of this land," he said quietly. "You have torn a fabric you did not weave. You have 3 days. Return the crown to the king, or the curse will consume you and your house." The masquerades faded like smoke on a windy day. But they did not leave him entirely. When Nonso stepped back onto the road, pain walked beside him, whispering his name. He began the long journey on foot, the bag heavy, his back scored by lash memory. He slept in doorways and under trees. He woke to the sound of unseen footsteps that kept time with his fear. In the hospital, Mr. John rubbed a hand over the blanket where his legs should have been. You, he said, simple and small. "I was wrong." You took his hand. "You are alive," she replied. "That is everything and more." The old woman stood, her shadow steady in the fluorescent light. "Learn the lesson written in your bones," she said. "Do not mock the warnings of God." On the second day of walking, Nonso crossed a dry streambed and nearly fell from weakness. He pressed on. Children saw him and ran ahead. By the time he reached the village gate, people had gathered along the road like a verdict. The king stood at the palace entrance with elders and guards at his side. Nonso fell to his knees, the bag held up as an offering. "Forgive me, your majesty," he cried, placing the crown at the king's feet. "My greed clouded my eyes. My hands became strangers to me." The king's face was carved from patience and sorrow. "You have returned what you took," he said, "but the spirits do not always return what they take. The price is heavy." A messenger ran up the steps. Breathless, eyes wide, he bent to the king and whispered, then turned to Nonso. "Your father has passed," he said. Nonso's body folded in on itself. A house collapsing in a storm. The villagers murmured, some in anger, some in pity, all in recognition of the old law. Greed devours the hands that feed it. They let him rise and leave with nothing but his shadow for company. He wandered to the river near the boundary of the village. The water held the cloudy sky like a mirror that remembered better days. "I have nothing left," he whispered to the water that had listened to villagers for years, holding their secrets without judgment. "Nothing to return to, nothing to become. And then, as if seeking the one place where no whip could reach him, Nonso stepped into the river. The current took him in an embrace that did not ask questions. The ripples spread and smoothed, leaving the surface calm as a closed eye. Back in the city, Mr. John came home in a wheelchair to a house rearranged by necessity and mercy. Each morning he called the children to the living room. He was the first to kneel. "Lord," he said, voice breaking, "thank you for the legs I still have, a heart to love my family, a mouth to bless your name." On Sundays he returned to church with an eagerness that humbled him. He learned to ask for help. He learned to listen when U's voice turned to prayer, and when the quiet in the room felt like a warning. In the village, the crown returned to its pedestal. The elders cleansed the hall, burning herbs that smelled of rain and memory. Children were kept from the palace for a time, to give silence a chance to mend what had been torn. Kemi came to the gate with a small basket of flowers. She placed them by the steps and bowed her head. "Let this be the last time," she said to the air, to her friends, to herself. In Mr. John's home, the old woman visited once more. She found him by the window, sunlight pooling at his wheels. "Mama," he said, eyes shining with a gratitude he could not measure. "I did not listen." "Now you do," she replied gently. "Make a home where warnings are welcomed. Raise children who pray not because fear tells them to, but because wisdom does." He nodded. "Yes." That evening, the family gathered around the dinner table. The children bowed their heads without being told. U's voice rose, low, strong, steady. Mr. John's voice joined hers, then covered it, then broke, and then steadied again. At the edge of the village, the river moved as it always had, toward places it did not yet know. Fishermen cast nets in the early mornings and pulled them up in the late afternoons. Murmuring thanks and names, mothers walked the path with baskets on their heads and children strapped to their backs. Stories traveled the road like peddlers, selling warnings for the price of attention. Some nights, an elder would sit by the fire and tell a tale of a man who mocked prayer and learned reverence through pain, of a boy who stole a crown and lost a kingdom he did not even know was his family, his future, his name. "Remember," the elder would say, eyes bright as coals, "warnings arrive like whispers. If you shout back at them, you will not hear what they came to say." The children would ask, "Baba, how do we know a true warning?" And he would smile. "True warnings echo. They come from elders and prophets, from mothers and old women by the roadside, from the still, small voice inside that refuses to be bought. They find you where you are, and if you do not listen, they will find you again on the road." He would poke the fire and add, "Pride is a loud companion, it drowns out soft voices. Greed is a hungry guest, it eats the host when the food is done." Sometimes a boy would ask about Nonso. Did he find peace? And the elder, not a man to waste words, would look into the flames and say, "The river keeps the secrets of those who return to it, but the lesson he brought back walks the village roads every day." And about Mr. John, the elder would say, "He learned that losing a thing can teach you how to hold everything else. He learned that love prays first and explains later. He learned to thank God for the prayers of a woman who bowed her head for an entire house." So the tale traveled from mouth to mouth, home to home, road to road. It gathered no dust because it kept moving. Like feet that understand the journey is also the destination. If you listen now, right now, in this moment, you may hear it, too. The soft request at the doorway of your day. Pray, pause, consider, where are you going, and who told you to go? What do you carry that does not belong to you? Which voice have you mocked because it sounded too small to matter? 2 warnings were given. One man ignored faith and lost his legs but found his knees. One boy ignored truth and lost his life before he could find his name again. When God speaks, listen. When elders warn, respect. When your heart whispers, obey. Because the same road that leads you home can also lead you to your end, and the difference may be just one prayer, one confession, one step back from the thing that is not yours. If you have heard this story, take from it a piece that fits your pocket and carry it with you. It is light, but it is strong. And when the next journey calls, do not be in a hurry to answer. First, bow your head.